Protestant, we're just going to focus on the fact that the Protestant church in no sense is one. And to say that it's invisibly one is not a coherent argument. It's a Nestorian ecclesiology. To say that it's holy, it does not produce holy people. It has no saints. It has no miracles. They don't even do exorcisms in Protestant churches. Now, some of these crazy charismatics do, but I'm sorry, I don't buy into Benny Hinn doing an exorcism. It is not Catholic in the sense of being universal, right? Most Protestant churches are tiny little denominations, strip mall churches, and so therefore they do not possess any Catholicity. They do not possess any universality. And in the Old Testament, all the predictions of the church are that church, when it comes to be, when the Messiah comes, that it would conquer the nations. It fulfills the Old Testament prophecies of the Gentiles coming into the covenant to worship God. And so if your church is not historic, then it doesn't fulfill that, and it's not the church. And to be apostolic, as we said, the fourth mark of the church has to be both the apostolic doctrine and the apostolic succession and the sacraments, right? The sacraments of the church. The Protestants do not have the sacraments of the church, right? They might, in a sense, have a rite of baptism or something like this, but they do not possess real, authentic baptism, because many of them sprinkle, which is not baptism, and many of them do a Eucharist, which is symbolic, and therefore it's not a Eucharist, and you can't have the Eucharist without the bishopric. So they do not have the sacraments. Liturgical worship is the next point, and that's, as you can see, tied into the previous ones. This is, I think, my fifth point here. Liturgical worship is the way that the church worshiped in history. God, in the Old Testament, all throughout the Bible, lays down an ordered form of worship. And that ordered form of worship actually comes to us from the apostles. Now, not every single detail, right? But they did lay down basic liturgical services, which over time became normative in the church, in the Byzantine Empire, throughout the Roman Empire, the Latin Rite, the Byzantine, you could say, Rite, you could say, Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, Liturgy of St. James, Liturgy of St. Mark in Alexandria, and the Liturgy of Pope Gregory in the West, as it would come to be called. These are the normative ways that Christians for millennia, millions of them for millennia, worshiped God. That's the way the church that put the Bible together worshiped God. So on the one hand, if we believe the Bible and we believe that the people who put the Bible together were Christians in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th centuries, then God accepted the way that they worshiped, and the way that they worshiped is the same way that we worship in the Orthodox Church, right? We have not abandoned our liturgical tradition and heritage, and that's because we know that God wants to be worshiped in an orderly, reverent way. And Protestant churches, for the most part, reject liturgy, or they get rid of all the elements that are crucial to the liturgy, or they are evangelicals and they reject liturgy as a whole, and they are like rock services, smoke and mirrors, Pink and Floyd, Pink and Floyd, yeah, you could say that, Pink Floyd type rock concerts with laser lights and shit like this, right? Total nonsense. And so we have to understand that the Bible is liturgical, and it's connected to the daily readings, the lectionaries, the way that the church worshiped in this orderly way, all the way back to the earliest centuries. And so liturgical worship is necessary, and in the modern world, the Orthodox Church preserves the liturgy as it was done by the Church Fathers, the very ones who formulated the central doctrines of the Trinity, even, right? The Trinity, the deity of Christ, these key doctrines, these are formulated by great saints like St. Basil, who all worship God liturgically. So did God accept them? And if he did, does he not accept liturgical worship anymore? I mean, God was worshipped liturgically from the time of Noah to Abraham to Moses. Jesus himself attended a synagogue where the worship was liturgical. Why would this be centuries later, when God suddenly decides, oh, we don't want liturgical worship anymore? Now just roll around and bark on the floor like a dog. Laugh and roll around the floor like these idiot charismatics do. That's nonsense. That's not reverent. And that's not the way God wants to be worshiped. As we said, Protestantism is divided into, again, some people number it differently, 30,000 different. And every pastor is essentially a guru. Every pastor is his own little pope. There's nothing that guards these groups from evolving and losing the rule of faith, you could say, because every man is interpreting the scriptures for themselves. And so, for example, we in the liturgy recite the Nicene Creed every time we do the liturgy for the Orthodox, right? And that Nicene Creed is the way that it was for the first millennium before the Roman Church added the Filioque. So we have the ancient creed the way it was for centuries, and that's a basic rule and guide for us as Orthodox. There's nothing like that in the myriad of sects of Protestantism. And you could say, well, but many Protestant sects do believe in the Nicene Creed. Oh, but they all believe in the Nicene Creed with the Filioque, first of all, and they all believe in the Nicene Creed as is subject to their own interpretation. For example, the descent of Christ into Hades, amongst all the church fathers, that is Christ's human soul quite literally descending into the realm of the dead, Hades, and preaching the gospel there. That's what all the church fathers teach the descent means. But for the Protestants, for the classical reformers, as we said before, for many of them, they actually interpret that as the Father damning the Son. That's the descent into hell, is Christ being damned to take part of that payment for us, right? Which is completely blasphemous and heretical. So there's not really any rule of faith amongst Protestants, despite the fact that Protestants believe, oh, well, I just follow the Bible. No creed but Christ. No creed but Jesus. Well, that doesn't actually do very much. That doesn't say very much, because if I can just make up a Jesus in my own head, then it's just as much idolatrous as a Hindu, right? So you have to believe in the Jesus that is the Jesus of history, right? The Jesus who actually established a church within history. You can't make up your own Jesus. And that's why in Protestantism and evangelicalism, we get boyfriend Jesus, we get hippie Jesus, we get buddy Jesus, all these idols, right? That are not the Jesus of the New Testament and not the Jesus of the actual historical church. That Jesus is the one that's defined at Nicaea, that's defined at Ephesus, right? That's defined at these ecumenical councils all the way up for the first millennium for Orthodoxy. So again, 30,000 different sects and just making up the worship as you go. When you read Leviticus, does God accept making up worship as you go? No.